Aloha Hawaii, this is Pokaulai Nui and you are listening to Hawaiian Potpourri on radio station KWAI 1080 on your AM dial. We are broadcasting from the top of the Chinese Cultural Plaza here in Honolulu, Hawaii. Today is the 14th day of April in the year 2012. Welcome to the program or welcome back to the program. In the earlier half hour, we had been talking about an editorial piece that talked about Hawaiians and their support or non-support for Hawaiian sovereignty. And prior to that, we spoke about birthing and the experience in Hawaii, or some experiences here in Hawaii with regards to blue babies or stillborn babies, and in comparison with what had happened in Argentina, where a child was declared dead and placed in a coffin, and then the mother went to visit the coffin and the newborn and found that the baby was actually alive. And so they recovered the baby, and we went through that. Okay, for those of you who have been listening, you've heard it all. And I continue to invite you to call us if you want to share an opinion on either one of those matters. I did say that I have just recently returned from New Mexico, where I participated in a conference sponsored by the federal government asking for indigenous peoples, and there were peoples from many different tribes across the United States, and we came from Hawaii, and I guess that was about it. Alaska also joined in. No one else from the Pacific except a person who actually came from Aotearoa, but his connection for being at the conference was that he was working at the School of Social Work at the University of Hawaii, and so he participated with us. We can cover that issue sometimes later, but another item that comes to my attention is not news article, but a letter to the editor, apply Dalai Lama's values to homeless. And I hadn't read that article, but it catches my attention. He says Tenzin Gyatso, the 14th Dalai Lama, is visiting Hawaii. Does he know how much money the city of Honolulu spends for police officers to race up and down the beaches and parks looking for someone sleeping after hours? The Dalai Lama writes or preaches about compassion. Do the homeless of Hawaii not deserve the same compassion? Not all the homeless are drug addicts. Some are homeless because of bad decisions or having experienced a tragedy such as losing a loved one. Anyone who has read about the Dalai Lama knows his views about China and Tibet. So what is the Dalai Lama doing here in Hawaii? And it's signed by Chris J. Torres of Kaimuki. Well, so you take it as you wish. My view is it's certainly not a basis for disqualifying the Dalai Lama from coming to Hawaii. With regards to the allocation of funds and what is being spent to arrest the homeless and essentially criminalizing the evidence of poverty, which is what they are doing with the homeless folks. And by criminalizing and finding a way to make the evidence of poverty become criminal, they are trying to somehow identify the individual and some of the mistaken decisions that the individual has made with respect to his or her circumstance. And somehow the decision made with respect to the circumstance becomes the wrong decision, and it borders on criminality. So that, and that's I used this term before, so I don't want to overuse it, but that's essentially the logic model that is followed too often when one looks at homelessness. The writer says again, not all the homeless are drug addicts. Some are homeless because of bad decisions or having experienced a tragedy, such as losing a loved one. And even at that point, Not all the homeless are homeless as a result of any decision they made. They themselves may have been victims of circumstance, such as the economy going so bad that they lose their jobs simply because of that. And as a result of that, not their choice, they end up not able to pay for the housing that they had. And on the other extreme, you may have some people who say, hey, fooey with having to pay rent. The environment is the best home that I could have, and I'm going to just move out, and I'm not going to hurt anyone. I'm not going to commit any crimes, but I just actually enjoy living on the beach or living outside, maybe in a car. Is that a crime? I don't think so. I think it should be called option. I think it should be called the choice of not being a cloned American citizen. It should be called the choice of exercising a different form of self-determination. It may be also called a choice of being somehow closer to your God, closer to your environment, closer to your true nature. Is that wrong? Is that right? Well, I would say that's not a right question to ask. The question should be, should people have the right to make such choices? What do you think? 524-1080. We'll give you a chance to speak on this subject or some of the other subjects we spoke about, 524-1080. And to the last caller, if you would like to call back and continue and bring out other points with regards to that discussion or any other discussion, feel free to call as well. Okay, 524-1080, we'll put you on the radio. There's another article. I was going to spend some time on this IME medical topic, but I won't touch it. Let's go to the telephones for now. Aloha caller, welcome to the program.
Yeah, Boka.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And so...
well, I tell you what, before you continue...
Yeah.
because we have another caller also waiting.
Oh, okay.
Let me take the other caller and put you on hold. How's that? Is that okay?
I'll call back.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, let's go to the caller. Our telephone number here is 524-1080. Aloha caller, welcome to the program.
Oh, Poka, I would have given my place to the other fellow because you said so much that I really shouldn't start talking about it. Too much. You know about the article you're speaking about where it said that majority of Hawaiian people didn't want sovereignty, didn't approve of it.
Yes. And what he actually said was native Hawaiians. So he was limiting the issue of sovereignty to only native Hawaiians. I think a number of programs back we talked about the Hawaiian nationals as also having the right to sovereignty. That brings in another question, but I just wanted to bring that clarification. But go ahead. I'm sorry for interrupting you.
That's all right. I couldn't hear you anyway.
Oh, thanks.
I mean, nothing I can do about it. Opened the radio too late. But at any rate, okay. I understand possibly what you're saying. I have women tell me that they didn't want as much freedom as I was speaking about. So you may have people like that. They like the security of knowing what's there, and they don't like the insecurity of having to, say, cooperate with nature. They'd rather have the security of technology doing all that for them. And I can see that, although I think it's a shame because it, of course, is contributing to the downfall of the species, at least from my point of view. And then this business of, and it is a business, of criminalizing homelessness, we realize that prisons are being privatized, have been privatized, and they continue to be so. Now, if marijuana is legalized, that will dry up their supply of prisoners, and they're in the business of making money from these prisoners. So they are now opening another source of business. Now, that's my mind, and that's how it works.
Okay, that's how...
The rest up to you.
So what you're saying is that, one, they criminalize people who are, in essence, innocent of simply trying to be who they be themselves. And by criminalizing it, they've also commercialized it into prison making a lot of money.
Yes.
So they're picking up the innocent and profiting from their poverty.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Pretty neat, isn't it?
Huh.
When you especially can write laws that make these business deals possible. So it's like that in my mind. Okay.
Wow, wow. All right. Thank you very much for calling. And if you would like to call and share an opinion, our telephone number is 524-1080. 524-1080. You're experiencing the wonders of a flowing conversation and free thought, where a lot of these ideas are not generally spoken about. And yet, when you start listening and examining these things, you come out with many more things. It just blossoms, or some people would say it explodes into a terrible scenario. I think it's a blossoming, and if you would like to call and join in this process of blossoming, our telephone number is 524-1080. I am Poka Lainui, and the name of this program is Hawaiian Potpourri. If you are seeing this on the television, then it's not at the time or date that I am announcing it on. It's probably in the future. What we are trying to do is put these programs onto YouTube. I'm still negotiating with Olelo to get some of these programs on more quickly. And if you went to, on the computer, you Googled it and went to YouTube, and it's under either Poka Lainui, and you may find it under Hawaiian Potpourri, or try to Google both of these. And of course, this is a radio program, but I don't think that is significant in the location of it. You can select the time and dates that it had played, and we try to advise that, and we try to give you a hint as to the subject matter that we have discussed on these programs. Okay? And if you're seeing it on the television, then you already know how to get to it, I assume. All right. If you would like to call, 524-1080 is the number that we have here. Let's go back to our telephones. Aloha caller, welcome to the program.
Yeah, Poka.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And so when this writer draws this conclusion that the idea really is not popular, I think he's really out of touch with what is happening, and certainly with what I have seen that is going on around here. He probably is unaware of Henry Noah and his efforts, and all the people that have become attached to that effort, as well as others. I think he'd be shocked to hear the way history is being taught in schools now, with the way that Hawaiian history is being presented. I think he would, my guess is he would be one of these people that would call it history revisionism, which actually is, which is actually true, but there's nothing bad about that, right?
Yes.
Because when the foregoing historiography was really one-sided and ignored so much of what actually was on the record, then I think revision is needed. The way that term is used, history revisionist, it seemed like a lot of times of the people who use that term, they seem to think that the word revision is somehow
a bad thing.
Yeah, somehow inherently bad, and it's neither bad nor good. It all depends what is being revised and how it's being done. So that guy is really. I think he's like a lot of people who think like him. They're out of touch with the movement, so to speak, and the efforts that are happening because of, that the mainstream media is itself largely out of touch with what's happening.
Yeah.
and what's going on. So these people watching the mainstream media, they're not aware either.
Yes.
The mainstream media here, the newspaper, the television stations, they are uncomfortable with with the change that so many of us want to see.
Yeah.
And so they wish to just...
The mainstream media is the establishment which we are trying to make changes around. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to get to was, you had a caller, the last caller last Sunday, and he, I think he used the word occupation sarcastically from what he had to say. I'm almost sure he did.
Oh, I remember that call.
Yeah,
he said he was a happy occupied or happy occupied.
Right. Yeah. So you can tell he's using the word facetiously or
with some sarcasm. Yeah.
Now, he seemed to... One of the points that he made was that, well, if it weren't for the United States protection, I think he even said, we would be working in rice paddies and so forth, right?
And our women would be servicing 20 Japanese soldiers.
Right. Yeah. Well, in the first place, actually, the United States was not even able to protect their own forces, right? I mean, look what happened to them, right?
That's an interesting
Did they
point.
protect themselves effectively? And in the process of trying to shoot back, they killed some of our local people. All of the civilian, what do you call it, casualties that were caused by the American anti-aircraft fire.
Good point. I hadn't seen it that way.
The Japanese didn't attack any civilian areas at all.
They accidentally, a plane, was it, fell in Niihau, or somehow there was a Niihau incident.
Right.
But that was accidental. It wasn't part of the orders that they received.
Yeah, right. And so that's point one. I mean, they couldn't even
protect
adequately
us.
defend themselves. How they could protect us? And secondly, if you really know the history, the aim of the Japanese was not to invade and occupy Hawaii, and not at all. They simply wanted to put the U.S. fleet that was headquartered here out of action for several months' time, so they could firmly entrench themselves in the places that they had conquered. And then, by the time the U.S. had recovered, the prospect of, driving the Japanese out would be so formidable that the Americans would, would think, it's too much trouble, Let us negotiate some kind of a settlement.
I see. Okay.
But the idea was not to invade and occupy. And furthermore, if that's what the Japanese had wanted to do, they could have. Look what they did, with just the air raid.
Yeah.
You see? So if they wanted to come in here, they would have. The U.S. wouldn't have been able to stop them. So, I mean, that's another point against him.
Yeah.
And then, his view that that the U.S. was here to protect Hawaii. The fact is, if the Japanese had done a better job in the attack, if, for instance, they had destroyed the repair facilities, the dry docking areas, the fuel storage facilities, if all of these things had been destroyed, it would have been a much more successful attack, especially from a strategic standpoint. Tactically, it was a success, but strategically, not so, because they failed to get at those areas.
Yeah.
And, of course, they failed to get the carriers. But if they had succeeded in at least destroying the repair facilities and fuel storage facilities, the next thing that would have happened would have been the U.S. Navy would have withdrawn to California. You see? So much for protecting Hawaii. Because then, Pearl Harbor then would have been untenable,
Yeah.
because they cannot store fuel.
Right.
And they cannot repair ships. So they got to move back to California. So,
well, would that have turned the war had the U.S. not have the facilities at Pearl Harbor to continue to carry out its Pacific fleet?
It's kind of hard to say because they did break the naval code of the Japanese, so they had some
advantage there.
They had some heads up as to what would happen.
Yeah. But even after breaking the code, the initial code, and being aware of the sneak attack, they were not effective in defending it. Maybe it was a tactic simply to get into the war. So I'm not sure. Yes, they did break the code. Would the Japanese have known that the code had been broken?
Okay, how much of the code they had cracked by the time of the attack? I'm not sure. I don't think they had progressed as far as they did by the time of the Battle of Midway, which is about 6 months later.
Yeah.
But there's a question of. I think the Americans suspected something was going to happen.
Oh, they knew that the attack was coming at least within a week because they were able to get into the code that was sent from Tokyo to the Washington ambassador.
Yeah.
And they were able to intercept and break that code.
Yeah.
It's just that the message didn't identify the date and time of the attack, but they did say that there would be an attack coming quite quickly. It's just that the message itself was indefinite. But they were able to break at least the secret codes that the Japanese were using that so-called black box, they call it.
Right.
Yeah, to intervene.
Yeah. Well, I think definitely if the carriers had been here and they had been able to total those, then that would have been huge.
Yeah.
Because then the U.S. would not have been ready to go fight at Midway.
Yeah. We coming up to the news, and I think we have quite a bit more discussion on this subject matter. I do have someone else who would like to talk about it.
Yeah.
So after the news, listen in and call back if you want.
Yeah.
Thanks for your call. Take care. Aloha. And I want to say that this is Poka Lai Nui, and you are listening to Hawaiian Potpourri. We'll sit back, listen to a trip going to Diamond Head and other parts of Honolulu to Waikiki now, and we'll be back right after the news that comes on at 5 o'clock. This is Poka Lai Nui. You are listening to Hawaiian Potpourri. We are produced by the Hawaiian National Broadcast Corporation. The opinions expressed in this program are not necessarily those of the staff and management of this radio station or the Hawaiian National Broadcast Corporation.
Kaulana na pua o Hawaii Hope o ka aina Iki mai ka elele o ka loko ino Pala pala anunu me ka paka